One of the big teaching unions this morning is warning they don't have enough staff and they don't have enough cash to deliver the changes that you want to make to special education for kids with special needs. Are they wrong?
In February, Labour announced major reforms to England's SEND system, promising greater inclusion in mainstream schools. But with a new school year approaching, are schools ready to deliver them? With my mum working in a specialist SEND school, the future of SEND is something we talk about all the time at home.
I'm Maisie Norris, and this summer I went into schools to hear from the teachers expected to deliver these reforms.
It's the not knowing, I think, that's the killer here.
To find out how they're coping with rising demands in an already pressured system.
It feels kind of quite unsustainable.
And whether these changes really put children, families and their teachers at the heart of SEND, or whether money is shaping the future of the system.
You know, budgets and money is everything, isn't it?
So what is this white paper actually saying?
There's a lot to it and nobody really 100% knows what it says, but overall I think it's promoting inclusion, which means that children with special educational needs, where possible, will be educated in a mainstream school. And that's great. I love that idea. Where it falls down is that they're also saying that less children will get EHCPs and their educational healthcare plans. And they come with money attached to them, the legal documents, and it says what the school must provide, and it comes with funding. So the school has an obligation to give the child this extra support, but it has money to do so. Mm-hmm. And these new reforms say, a lot of children now won't get an EHCP, they'll get an ISP. Now an ISP is written by the school. The emphasis is on the teachers to decide what does this child need, but there's no funding that comes with it. So the teacher has to look and say, this child needs this, this and this in order to thrive and meet their targets.
But we're not going to give you any extra money to make that happen.
Exactly. So it's more inclusive practice with less money to make it work.
And why are they doing that then?
Well, cynically, it appears to be budget driven. I think the government's trying to save money, so it promotes it as inclusive practice, which is, you know, politically appealing. People think, yeah, that's great, more children in mainstream settings. It sounds great, but if you send a child to a mainstream school who has needs and you say to the teacher, right, you've got to decide how to meet those needs, but sorry, there's no money to do so, how is that going to work?
And then that seems like it'd put a lot of pressure on the teacher.
Yeah.
To better understand the thinking behind the reforms, I spoke to Margaret Mullane, one of the MPs behind the SEND white paper. I joined her as she was meeting with parents of SEND children at the local hospital.
I genuinely believe that government comes from this on what is best for the children. However, you know, budgets and money is everything, isn't it? So, and also I think that is against a background. I know from the schools in my constituency, they're all running a deficit. I had a school come up to see me in Parliament on Monday and they said to me, what's going to happen with our pay and what's going to happen with that? So, you know, we come from a position that's very tough. And obviously there's great need, isn't there? It's when it starts to roll out that's when you will see what works and what doesn't. And I think that there's a little bit of a worry from some parents that if they come up against kind of barriers, what happens then? It's terrible. And you know, and we have to do much better than what we're doing.
So I've just left my conversation with Margaret and I feel like for policymakers, cutting costs really is the priority. But I don't know whether these reforms can actually succeed without the proper funding.
It's the next day and I'm on the way to meet up with Tom Robinson, a primary school teacher with a large proportion of SEND pupils, to find out what the changes could mean for mainstream schools.
There are a lot more children in school now with EHCP than ever before. So for my school, for example, over 10% of the school has an EHCP. So 660 children and 68 EHCPs, which is an unbelievable amount when you think that there are special schools with less than that. The range has changed, so you've got children with what we call SLD, severe learning difficulties, or PMLD, so complex sort of physical needs. We have those in school now. So they often come with a lot higher money, a lot higher funding, so the amount of EHCP money has gone through the roof.
In Essex, where Tom's school is, almost a third of the council's entire education budget is being spent on EHCPs. An FOI request revealed that figure was over 250 million in the 2025-26 financial year alone.
I can have children who are SLD and actually are relatively straightforward to include in my school. But I've got children who are not as highly funded, who are far more complex in this setting, because they're going to run round and they're going to attack other children, they're going to smash things, they're going to bite adults. So they reading between the lines of the new white paper, they're the ones that schools are worried about getting funding for. They're the children that we think might get the ISPs, the individual support plans, but does any money come attached? Because they're the ones we're going to struggle, and there are more and more and more of them. Or if EHCPs are preserved for the children with the complex needs, and every child within EHCP is in special school, that means either two scenarios. They're going to increase building of special schools. That's not happening, right? Or an awful lot of children with EHCPs are not going to have EHCPs anymore.
So he told me that EHCPs can provide around £10,000 worth of funding per child, which sounds like a lot, but if you need a one-to-one support worker, that can cost over £22,000 a year. And if fewer children in mainstream are going to be getting EHCP funding, then these resources are going to be spread even thinner.
To see what that pressure looks like in the classroom, I spoke to Michaela Gilmore, who has worked in both mainstream and specialist SEND settings. She knows what it's like to teach a class where children need one-to-one support, but don't always have it.
If a child is dysregulated, there's only a certain amount of adults that can actually deal with that child. And then quite often, if someone's dysregulated, it kind of sets the other children off. And then you've got not just one child, you've got 6 children dysregulated. I remember quite clearly one day in particular, I had a child who would be going to crisis quite regularly, and when he was in crisis, he would just run and gone into your mum's classroom, and he had told another child in her classroom. But at the same point in time, she had another child in crisis who was flipping tables and chairs over. I couldn't get in to help her, so she's had to evacuate her classroom through another exit. So the classes weren't mixed because of the needs that we had. And at the same time, Abigail's class could hear in what was going on, so she had to evacuate because one of the children in her class had gone into crisis as well. So we had 3 classrooms evacuated in 3 different areas with 3 different children in crisis that we couldn't get to. So you have to rely on support from, SOT, your assistant head, deputy head, head teacher, as long as they're on site, as long as they're not in, big important meetings with external agencies. So at some points it was really hard to kind of, in the end, sometimes you're putting 2 or 3 classes together, so you've got one adult free to go and try and support.
This just sounds insane.
Yeah, it is. It is insane, really. I don't really know what the answer generally is for the government right now. It kind of needs a full overhaul, I think, but I think they need to come in and see what the issues are and speak to people in general to know what the issues really are to work with.
So I was speaking to Michaela about when you guys used to work together.
We laughed about it, but we often felt we weren't giving those children what they need. There wasn't the training, there wasn't the techniques we didn't really understand. And when I went into special needs education afterwards, and for me it was brilliant. I went to a really good school that provides training to other schools. They have teachers come in, and I went on a lot of courses very quickly. And suddenly I was finding all these tools and tricks and techniques that I thought, that would have been great. I could have used that.
So you wish you'd known that when you were in
It would have made such a difference. This is the problem in education, is there's no standardised approach. Right. There is no training that says for these children, and okay, you can't have a one-size-fits-all. If you do this, this will work. But there's so many teachers out there that are just not getting that opportunity, that don't have those resources. Are you delivering the best quality inclusive education? Hand on heart, probably not.
After speaking to my mum and Michaela, I wanted to find out what training is actually available to mainstream teachers. I went to Leytonstone in East London to meet Kirsty Fletcher, a deputy head teacher who took it upon herself to visit a SEND school and develop her own expertise to share with her staff.
Budgets are tight, and we know that our priority is making sure that we have inclusive practices across the whole school, particularly for the year groups with high SEND needs. And we must upskill and train our staff. But because budgets are tight, we then have to train within the school. It's only through networking, knowing people in a SEND school, that I was able to do that. That was just a quick email, can we come and visit? And we were able to see what it looked like in practice, which was so useful. But I think without those connections, we may have missed out on that opportunity. I think it should definitely be part of the reform for mainstream schools to make contact with SEND schools. I think that would be hugely beneficial. I think the message about teachers having to adapt their practice when we were trained in such a different way is really quite difficult for our staff. That's why training is really important. I've seen so many teachers change careers completely because of the pressures of working in a mainstream school.
Kirsty's experience reflects a wider challenge facing schools. 75% of teachers say meeting the needs of pupils with SEND is one of the biggest challenges in their classrooms. And with 1 in 3 teachers leaving the state-funded sector within 5 years of qualifying, I wanted to hear from someone at the start of their career. Lydia Wood is a newly qualified teacher, and I wanted to ask her whether she can see herself staying in the profession long term.
Burnout is definitely a thing for a lot of teachers. I think particularly when you go through those periods in the year where there's a lot of extra pressure around assessments, mocks, there's a lot of focus on that. I guess teaching is a job that you are very emotionally invested, and you spend a lot of time worrying about how much you've done to support those students. And I think what's really difficult about teaching is it feels kind of quite unsustainable, the amount of time and dedication that needs to be put in to be a fantastic teacher. I worked with a girl last year who moved schools after a year. When you join with like Teach First, you're supposed to be in your school for minimum 2 years before you move, but she moved early because she was really struggling. But I think teaching is a real thing that like people do leave it because it's hard.
Having just left Lydia's, it's clear that teachers at the beginning of their profession are already feeling like this career is not sustainable, and that shows how much pressure they really are under. But nowhere is that pressure stronger than in specialist SEND schools, where teachers work with children with the most complex needs every day.
To find out more, I met Natasha Bridger, head of primary at my mum's specialist SEND school, to talk about the growing challenge of recruiting and retaining staff, particularly teaching assistants.
As far as special needs teachers go, it's incredibly hard to get anyone to apply for the job. It is a special type of person who can do this job. I do understand that, but the amount of people who apply is quite shocking. They're superheroes, really, the people that work here, and we feel they're superheroes. The parents do as well. But morale can get low. It can. You know, especially at times when you have a lot of staff absence, an outbreak of flu can absolutely, like it does with all schools, can absolutely cripple a school. And in those cases, then you have very few staff in, and all the children in, and it can put people under a lot of pressure. These are long hours that our staff work. For the majority of staff, the pay that they get is less than if they worked on a till in Tesco's. And what our staff do is not comparable. Hygiene, feeding, medication, dealing with children's behaviours, all of these things are expected from our staff, and all of our staff really rise to the challenge and do a superb job. But do I feel their pay is equal to what they do? No.
What I've learned is simple. Teachers are being expected to do more with less.
As September approaches, expectations are growing, but many teachers are already stretched to breaking point.
The government promises every child the support they need to thrive, but with serious lack of funding, that promise is only as strong as the people expected to deliver it.